Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And today is actually the second in a two-part series considering category management. What we can do to not only implement category management, but also do so in a way that's more sustainable over the long term. And if you recall from part one, which was released and published just a couple of days ago, that was episode 96. My guests are Lynn Rideout, the Senior Manager of Category Management, and also Chris Eyerman, the Senior Director of Program Management, both coming from Denali Sourcing Services. And in that part one, and you can find that at artofprocurement.com/CM part one, that's /CM part one, Lynn and Chris shared some of the organizational building blocks that are required to develop a category management capability that's sustainable, over the long term after all that low-hanging fruit has been picked. But today I want to actually switch focus and go to the perspective of the category manager and the recommendations that Lynn and Chris make to help category managers achieve better outcomes from their category strategies. So I'm going to cut straight into the discussion. And the first question that I asked Lynn is, what are some of the things that she recommends to category managers in terms of how they can build robust category plans that really lead to better outcomes?
Yeah, I think this is where it can get really overwhelming, because a lot of the things that we're talking about, an individual category manager can nod and say, yeah, it makes sense. I want to reach this point. I want to do the work that you're describing. I want to be, as we say, strategic in whatever that means. But it can also be very quickly overwhelming. We talked about a lot of the building blocks. We've talked about building category plans and getting to meet a number of stakeholders and all of the tools and templates and processes that go with that. So it can easily become overwhelming. So we've tried to really break it down into three, what we call imperatives, that if you think about nothing else but these three things and you apply them to the building blocks that we talked about and you apply them to the journey, it can really help you as a category manager, start to transform and start to think about these things in a way that becomes not so overwhelming. So we talk about three of them: knowing your stakeholders, understanding your categories, and delivering results. And just to talk about each for a moment, when we talk about knowing your stakeholders, we talk about really knowing them, really spending time with them, understanding their pain points, understanding what they're being asked to deliver for the business, understanding what keeps them awake at night, understanding how you can best start to help them, and really ways that maybe in the past procurement has caused them to shut the door, and listening a little bit before you talk, and then starting to work with them, not kind of push things at them or again, think about it from a procurement point of view. So really understanding that stakeholder map and being thoughtful around what are the best ways to communicate with them, what are the best ways to get their attention and to understand them. Then we talk about knowing your categories or understanding your categories, and it really comes down to, anytime procurement comes knocking at the door, from my past experience, the category I focused on the most was marketing. If I'm procurement and I'm coming to marketing, I'm going to turn off marketing very quickly if I talk like procurement. And if I just kind of say, I'm here to save you money, that's not a great way to deliver value. And
we'll never have another conversation with them again.
Yeah, exactly. So you can get the door shut very quickly. But if I understand a little bit about their business, I understand a little bit about what they're doing, what's important to them, and I understand a little bit about what's going on in the market, I can come better armed for that conversation, and they don't necessarily have to feel like they have to train me from nothing on their category, that I'm at least trying to do some of the legwork on my own. So really starting to understand what they think about and what is going on in the market relative to them can be a very useful way to start to get more meetings, more discussions, and less doors shut. And then delivering results. This all sounds great, and the best processes and templates in the world and councils and ways of thinking about things are all useful and elegant, but if you're not actually delivering results, if you're not actually using all of that to culminate in a portfolio, to culminate in a plan of this is what I think we can all go after, that's good for the business, drives value, and really makes procurement someone that you want to have with you at the table to drive more and more value, it's all for naught. So I think sometimes it gets overlooked a little bit because, I think we're used to, yes, I ran a sourcing project and I got X% savings, but this is really taking that up a number of notches to say delivering results in all forms across procurement. It might be, better management of a supplier that leads to results. It might be, averting risk because you're getting things under contract that previously maybe fell by the wayside or people just overlooked. Or it really may be consolidating suppliers or some of those standard things that we think about because you had a thoughtful plan that the business bought into and delivered value that the business was behind from the start, versus just, again, kind of a procurement exercise to get cost out. So those three imperatives, I think, oftentimes become things that we talk to stakeholders in the procurement space about first and foremost, to say if you can get comfortable with those and you can think about those, you're well on your way. And obviously some of the other pieces that are more the methodology and the process and the templates will start to make a lot more sense.
Right. It's like focusing on the relationship. You mentioned relationship as like a key capability earlier. When you want to, or from my experience, when you're having that first meeting with a stakeholder, they're wondering, well, what are procurement trying to do? What really is in this for me in working with them? I need to see that the procurement person, the category manager, is actually going to bring value to me. And so you mentioned the point about understanding your categories. That's one of the key ways to do it, because if you have a first meeting and I found you don't really know that much about your category, then immediately the first impression is, well, this person that's sitting across the table is not really going to help me, not going to really bring me much value, and maybe they'll be able to facilitate a process, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, it becomes very easy to shut down future conversations by just not coming armed with the right information. And I think Chris has alluded to this earlier, but I think if you're doing category management well and you have the right pieces, even if it's just at the foundational level, you're going to know I need to bring information with me. I don't just show up and say, hey, I want to have a relationship with you. That can be certainly part of it. But if you're bringing information with you and you're using the information to drive a conversation and you're reacting based on, the nuances that the stakeholder's giving you and you're learning from that in each conversation, it's clear that you're applying it. I think quickly the business stakeholders can start to look at you and say, okay, gosh, I see a day where they really could add value. They are really trying to listen and understand, but they're not taking so much of my time that it's a waste of time.
Right.
They're really bringing something with them as well that's benefiting me quickly.
Well, we just found this to be a pretty powerful framework to just really calm the situation down. As Lynn mentioned, there's a lot of change occurring, and the majority of change is occurring right with the category managers. That they may be changing roles or asked to do more. So if you just step back and think, hey, when I'm waking up every day and looking at my calendar, these are the kinds of activities that should make up the majority of your day. So it's also a good way to look at, where should you be finding ways to take work off your plate. And ideally that may be things like some of the execution level work, the project execution, the chasing suppliers type of activity. And these activities will really kind of align you more to the strategic activities. The flip side of that is, well, what do you do with that work? And that's a really important consideration that an organization has to think about is through that whole journey that Lynn talked about. When you think about the work required to develop a good category strategy and good category plan, it's in often cases it's not trivial. If you're a category manager with a portfolio of activities and are currently focused on other execution work, the organization needs to make sure that some of that work is offloaded. And one of the things that we always recommend is isolate some of that work, especially the execution-related stuff, to say a center of excellence or another centralized function to give your category managers the appropriate bandwidth to do their job and to be more strategic. It doesn't make sense to just continue to pile it on and say, continue to do your job, but also, be more strategic and develop strategies.
So in my personal experience, I've been put into category management roles where I've really been a generalist. So I know category management, I know process, but I don't necessarily know intimately the details of the market that I'll be supporting because, a lot of companies just, the ROI doesn't make sense for them to put specialists into roles in all category-facing roles. So do you make different recommendations to a generalist versus a subject matter expert in terms of how they start to build the relationship that they have with their stakeholder?
I think the short answer is yes, but I guess I would say oftentimes even the best of category managers, when they're stepping into a role, will likely have some areas that are stronger than others.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about the category manager as a salesperson, the category manager as an analyst, the category manager as a communicator. There are a lot of different skills. If across the whole you've got a lot of the right pieces, you understand the process, you understand how to communicate, you understand how to be a salesperson, you understand how to build relationships. You know, I think how you go about learning the category is then what matters.
Right.
So, you know, asking the right targeted questions when you're having a stakeholder discussion in a way that just doesn't feel like you're quizzing them for hours about their category, but ask good, thoughtful questions, I think can help actually build rapport in my experience. And I think then doing a little bit of the legwork on your own to find the sources of information that your company might already have, that you have just based on your experience, and that you have then even within your broader network of peers, suppliers, conferences, you know, all sorts of market intelligence sources, and starting to ramp up on that kind of in your quote unquote spare time, I think really can demonstrate that you're willing to learn and you're a quick learner, and I think that can make a difference. I think where you fall into a little bit of trouble is when you just keep pushing the process at a stakeholder to say, well, I have to follow the process, or I just have to do this because this is what's next on the list. I think that obviously, you know, can again start to shut some doors. But if you're ramping up and you're doing what it takes to look at that enabler of market intelligence and market knowledge and leverage that and leverage the information that you have in terms of spend data to just further educate yourself and ask the stakeholders the right questions, I think it actually can be a good starting point. It can be that you bring a sense of objective questioning to things, and it can be very warmly received. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it is a very good thing to be self-aware of. So when you look at yourself on the maturity curve or the maturity model and say, yep, this is going to be a weak area for me. What is my plan to spend extra time here to overcome it? That's where I think, you know, you can really start to transform very quickly.
Yeah, and so that at least the stakeholder can see that you're committed to learning their business, that you're not just going to fly in and sell them a process and try and fly back out again.
Exactly. And again, I found it very useful that if you're somewhat honest about that up front, and again, you spend a lot of time listening and you say, I absolutely understand that of the two of us, you are the expert on marketing, for example, and I need to understand you know, the way you think about it, and I need to obviously ramp up and start to understand this category better, but let me ask you a couple questions in the meantime, and then you complement that with what you're learning from all of your other sources. I've actually found that opens more doors than you might think in some categories because, again, people feel like you're listening, you're reacting to the information that they're giving you, and you're attentive to their needs versus just what you think their needs should be because you think you're the expert in it already.
Yeah, that's an important point, that, you know, don't make it out that you're the expert, because ultimately, and, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking back to experience I had on the direct side in automotive, where I couldn't possibly know all the ins and outs of the categories I'm buying because, you know, we have very specialized engineers who do this for a living and had education in certain areas. I was never going to know as much as they were about their category. So it was all about helping them, kind of being the go-between between them and the supplier ecosystem, but also helping, you know, lever their strengths commercially, if you will, whereas they're really experts in knowing what it is, that the ins and outs of what they're buying, but not necessarily how they're buying. So I had one final question as we start to wrap up, and you know, you talked about delivering results as being one of those cores, and we often find that we may be in conflict from our stakeholders in terms of what results look like. We may have one objective and our stakeholder may have a very different one. We talked about aligning, obviously being key to building really strong category strategies, but that's not always possible. So how do you advise category managers to deal with conflict when it is that you have very different objectives as you're approaching, you know, a particular category?
Well, what makes you think there's ever going to be conflict, Bill?
Yeah, only every single category, I think. There's some level of conflict, isn't there?
Yeah, that question can certainly take a lot of different directions depending on, what the specific conflict is. But if we just go back to, what category management is trying to do and the category management approach, I think it, by nature, it tends to build a more rigorous foundation, a more rigorous fact-based foundation that is going to at least help any of those situations. So, for example, if you're a category manager, the first thing you ask you have a different conflicting objective with a stakeholder. My first question is why.
Right.
If you're developing a category strategy, the core objective is to align to what the business needs to accomplish. Maybe the root cause of that is that procurement as an organization doesn't have their objectives set correctly. So the foundation of a good category management process is going to build up the understanding of the business, the requirements from the business stakeholders, the external marketplace, and build a good fact base so that if you get into a conflict situation, and I could think of a situation, maybe it's not with an individual stakeholder, or maybe it's maybe you're working across multiple business segments, and you're trying to develop a global category strategy, and of course, in a lot of cases, there might be some single business segment that may not benefit as much as others. So they may look at that and say, "Hey, I'm not really happy about that." By building up a good fact base in your category strategy and leveraging tools like, say, a category council, can be very effective mechanisms to kind of bring the facts to the business, kind of build the case that says, "Hey, you may not be getting as well off as the other business segments, but for the corporation, this is the right thing to do." And so that's how I'd approach it, is to try to come to that situation with as much, fact and database as possible.
So as we look to wrap up, I know we've covered a lot of information, but I just wanted to, give you the opportunity. Is there anything that you really would like to kind of press home and leave listeners with as a couple of really important points as they're thinking more about the category management journey?
Yeah, I just have a couple that I thought about as we were talking about this category management journey. Is it's critical to recognize that the value that's created through category management, it happens from the get-go. So we talked about building the foundation, trying to drive consistency, and the journey that entails across all the pieces that you need to put in place to get to your vision. But we've seen time and time again that the value that's driven out of category management is realized, right out of the gate, right? As soon as the organization starts to put focus on developing strategies, doing that in a consistent way, and building more robust portfolios for the business. So just wanted to make that clear. And then the second piece is that this notion of kind of continuous evolution and change of the vision even. So as you get into the building the foundation and category managers are developing strategies, the organization is adjusting and learning, is to take those learnings and to update your roadmap. You're going to be changing which categories you're focused on clearly. You're going to be changing your focus within individual categories and your strategies. But you even need to think about changing your vision where appropriate. Take those learnings, adjust, and continuously align that so your organization knows where you're going at any given time, and continue to adjust that.
And so if listeners would like to continue the conversation, learn a little bit more about category management, or even just reach out to both of you, where would the best places be for them to find you? And I'll link up to those in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd say best way, feel free to connect with either Lynn or myself on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I will link to both yourself, Chris, and also to Lynn's LinkedIn profiles. I'll also link up to Denali USA and Denali Sourcing Services. I'll do that in the show notes today. The show notes for the episode are going to be at artofprocurement.com/category management. That's artofprocurement.com/category management. So Lynn, Chris, just thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.